Hello, welcome to Awaken Your Creative Self. I'm your host, Claudia Chen. It is my absolute pleasure to kick off this challenge with this special guest expert today. She is the owner and hand lettering artist behind Love Lettering, where her main focus is to letter beyond paper. She is the author to the book Extraordinary Hand Lettering and the creator of the YouTube channel, The Lettering Lifestyle. In February 2020, she put together an art exhibition called Bottled Feelings. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Doris Wai. Hi, Doris. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
I'm so thrilled to have you here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Doris, would you be able to share with our viewers about yourself and how you got onto your creative journey to where you are today?
Well, my creative journey, I think, started when I was really young. I think I was always really in love with painting and drawing and things like that. But I knew that I was also really into different types of lettering because I discovered this book called The Lettering Book when I was in, I think grade 4 or 5. And that book actually showed me different letters, like bubble letters and block letters and typewriter letters and things like that. And so since then, I've been kind of a little bit obsessed about lettering. But anything where I was able to make or create, I was always very into it. So I've always explored painting and oil pastels and calligraphy and scrapbooking. I was always making something when I was young, right? So it's kind of been a part of who I was since I was really little. And I don't ever think that there was a point where I discovered I just think I always was. So yeah.
It's always so interesting to me to talk to people who have started this passion when they're young. And would you be able to tell us a little bit about the support of your family? Because I know that your family played a very significant support for you. Would you just comment a little bit more about that?
Well, growing up in an Asian household, I think most Asian parents would like us to have, regular, stable jobs, accountant, doctor, work with the government, things like that. My parents were not as strict as your typical parents. And they did notice that I did have, a talent and a patience for the arts. So like even though I think it was probably a little bit worrisome to them, for them to have a child that might do something creative, they still allowed me to pursue it and encouraged me because they knew that it was something that I really, really was good at, to be honest with you, right? They could tell I was very good at it. So they did support me in terms of sending me to art classes, and when it was about time to apply for universities and things like that, I worked with a studio to get my portfolio together and things like that, and I did end up attending the Ontario College of Art and Design. Well, it's a university now, but it was just a college back then. And I did end up graduating in illustration. So I think it would have been different if my parents weren't as supportive as they were. However, I also have this infinity, I've always been a stubborn child, and I think that even if they weren't to be supportive of what I wanted to do, I probably still wouldn't have listened to them and still pursued my own, journey, right? With or without their help, right? As children, I think it's really hard to go against your parents and against the grain of what they want. However, it's how badly you want it inside, and how well you know yourself, right, as like a person, to know like what's best for you, right? So even I would like suggest, even for younger students, like if you do not have supportive parents, you just have to be really true and authentic to who you are. Now, if the case is your parents are paying for your schooling and they're not going to support art, nobody's saying that the only way to be an artist is to go through school. Like, you know, like there are many self-taught artists. Perhaps you can pursue your, you know, like what your parents want you to do, but still do what you want to do on the weekends and things like that, until you're able to, you know, do it on your own, right? So with or without supportive parents, if this is part of who you are as a human and as an artist, you have to definitely still dedicate the time to your craft and what you really love, right? So yeah, like you've heard it before. It's like, you know, things that you do while you're procrastinating is actually what you should be doing as a living, right? But what people don't tell you is like, you know, sometimes when you end up doing it as a living, you'll find it tedious, right? But I would think that you would only find it tedious if you don't infuse something new into what you're doing constantly, right? Like imagine if you're painting the same painting every time, like that wouldn't be fulfilling as an artist, right? You have to continue to, you know, evolve and change, right? So yeah.
And I feel that that is so important, that we actually realize that our life is actually determined by us, by ourselves. As you said, like it's very hard as we're growing up. It really depends on our personality, how strongly we believe in ourselves, or how much we listen to our parents. And I mean, when I was growing up, I was also dabbling in here and there with a little bit of creative stuff, but it's always been academic for myself. Like it's always been, okay, you're going to go through school, go find a job, and that is your life. And it was seriously, I remember there was one time my mom was sitting in the room with me and she said, I know going to work sucks, but that's how it is. You know, and it's like all that is like their mentality is so different in regards to, well, this is how it's supposed to be. And that's why I've always questioned, like, is it really that's supposed to be? And definitely whenever I see people like you or like other people who are creating something for yourself and building something for yourself, then I'm like thinking, well, why isn't that this person who can do this, but why can't I do this, right? So definitely that's something that we need to pay a little bit attention to.
You also have to keep in mind that our parents grew up in a different time as well. Like, do you know what I mean? Like their idea of like creativity and being an artist and things like that is different from what it is now, right? So they might not understand the potential of, you know, what an artist or a designer or, you know, a painter, you know, what type of like lucrative, you know, possibilities there are when it comes to being a creative, right? So we cannot really blame them. They haven't been exposed, like, you know, to the possibilities of what these things can bring, right? And what it means. But like but like I think we have to circle back to like everybody has their own life, right? Like parents often feel like they're allowed to dictate their children's lives because you're my child and, you know, I want what's best for you. But like sometimes parents don't always know what's best for the child. It's what they think is best for them. Like, you know, they're thinking about themselves when they're, you know, and they're projecting on their children, right? And sometimes that's not what's best for the child, right? Sorry, that's my dog.
That's okay.
Going crazy. But like being a mother myself now, right? And me being very aware that everybody, like every individual has their own path and wants and things like that. I think I'm just more in tune with like seeing what Melody, like my daughter, is good at, right? And what she likes to do. And I will just like make suggestions or take note, like mental notes for myself when and if she decides like, what do you think she's good at? Or if, you know, when she decides, oh, I think I want to do this, I'll be able to be like, oh, but yeah, you're very good at this, or you have passion for that, or you have patience for this, so I think it's as a mother's job to just observe what their children are talented at, and then like support them in the way that they need to be supported when they've decided what they want to do.
I just want to touch back on what you said, and I think like with me having a 3-year-old son, it is a topic that my husband and I myself always talk about. Because with us having a business, like how it is that we can raise him into being aware that he has the other options, and also checking in with ourselves that we don't limit his options because he's his own personality, he is his own person. So that is super important for us parents to actually encourage that. And I think like with your parents being so encouraging, I think that's so important because it's really your parents at the first line that they come across to say, hey, I can actually do this because my parents are not stopping me in any way, or they actually encourage me to explore. And of course, definitely like with my parents, like I definitely understand that like with the way that they were raised and everything, and they kind of bring in that mentality into, okay, you need to find a job, you need to work hard and retire. So it's a very different mentality that we actually grown into. So I really like that you actually brought that on. So it's the concept of like the starving artist concept. Would you just kind of touch upon this ideology of how people actually believed in it and how it is that people can break out of this thinking?
I don't know. I honestly don't know where the idea of starving artists came from. I don't know. Like, I don't know, because it's not like you see like painters on the street, like, you know what I mean? Like a lot of people selling paintings on the street and homeless, or like, I don't know what they mean like by that. Or like there's also this other misconception, oh, you'll never become rich or famous until you're dead. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's also that like, thing, right? I don't know where it came from, but that's kind of like what people think, right? But I I don't know how to change that. But I honestly don't think that that is what people think nowadays. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I think that nowadays people actually pay a lot for unique ideas and creativity and a mind that can think differently from what's already out there. That is what's valuable, is ideas, right? It's not only people with ideas, it's people that know how to communicate their ideas and actually bring them to life, that I think is valuable to any company, right? I think like in the previous generations, I think that one of the issues is that parents thought very highly of what other people think, right? Like our parents would be like, oh, what would so and so think, or aunt or uncle think, and our grandma would think, but in our generation right now, we are starting to not care what other people think, right? Like we're finding it's like, I don't care what you think, I'm just going to do me and do what I want to do, right? As long as it's true to who I am, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I think it's more widely accepted that, not to put other people's opinions, let their opinions weigh so heavy on what we want to do. So I think that like that's the thing that's like changing a little bit in our society, is to not let like other people's ideas or comments or opinions affect us and who we truly are, right? So yeah, like going back to starving artists, I'm not sure how that came about, right? But I don't think it took a lot of convincing my parents, because once I started my studio, I was kind of like up and running, and I could show to them, it's like, I'm still maintaining a living. Like I'm still like, I haven't lost my house or anything. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, but it's never that they never doubted that I had a talent, right? Like, to be honest with you, like after I finished OCAD, I went to Hong Kong to teach art for 2 years. And during that time, I was teaching children from like as young as 2 years old, like, you know, drawing shapes and holding scissors, to like teenagers and adults with life drawing and things like that. I helped like develop curriculum and things like that for the studio. So when I came back to Toronto, I didn't pursue anything creative because at that point I was still very insecure, like with my own creativity. Even though I finished OCAD, even though I was an art teacher, like, you know, all that stuff is me being creative for other people, if that makes any sense, right? I'm applying my creativity to help others, right? But there, nothing is like, my name is not stamped on those things. But with me, like opening love lettering, it's really like the spotlight is just on me, and the whole like artistic burden is on myself, right? So for years I didn't create, like I could have, like I honestly kick myself, like I wish I had this mentality back then, like when I was 25, because I would have been way ahead of my game at this point, right? Because I always had this, like, you know, this creativity in me, and what I do now, I could have always done it. Like I could have started when I was 25, but I didn't, because I didn't have the confidence at that point. And at that point, I still cared what people thought, which was one of the things that stifled me from, you know, pursuing my own creative, you know, business or journey, right? If I had enough confidence to just go for it back then, or if I had someone who, you know, pushed me to do it, I know that I would be way ahead of, like, you know, where I am now. So that's why I'm just like, if you as like a young person knows what you want to do, like, then just start. Like, you know, there's nothing keep stopping you from starting. The only thing that stops anyone from starting is themselves. Like you are your own like barrier, and that's basically it. Like, you know, so I have so much to talk about when it comes to you know, creating hurdles for one's own self, like, you know. So but the reason why I started love lettering was because I had my daughter, right? And I really wanted to spend more time with her, as well as I really wanted to dedicate my life to something that was who I am, right? As opposed to just my job. So I know that, like, whatever I do with love lettering, it's kind of creating a story about who I am, as opposed to, oh, I went to work. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like anybody who goes to work, that is who they are. It's just something that they do sometimes. Like, do you know what I mean? They do it because it's like their means of living, right? Or income, but it's not necessarily who they are, right? It's just part of, like, you know, like society and economics, right? It's not like who they are. So for me, love lettering is more of like a story and a legacy for my daughter to discover who I am. So let's just say this video, if it ends up being on YouTube forever, like, she can come back to this conversation and she'll know who I am, and why I started the company is because, you know, and when I had her, I think that that's when I discovered that I really don't care what people think so much. Or maybe I'm projecting like myself on her. Like, I don't want her to allow people to dictate her life by like their opinions and things like that. Just, you know, like, do what you think is good for you, and like pursue the things you want to pursue, right? So
I want to say that there are two things that really stood out to me of what you said, because I think there are a lot of people who still care about like what other people think of them, and that's why they have something that's inside of them that they knew that they wanted to do, but because of them being scared of what other people think of them, they haven't really started. And that is something that I'm so interested to talk about, because whenever I come across some people, I know that there's that passion that they have, but then I'm like, hey, what about this? Like, you're so good at this. And they're like, no, I don't think so. No, I'm scared.
Okay. But like, my question is like, I would say to those people, it's like, what are you actually scared of?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do you think is the worst thing that would happen if you were to share this with the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, I think that's one of the things that stopped me too, is like, I'm scared because like, I don't want people, like, because my art is so personal to me
Mm-hmm.
that if somebody didn't like it, it would feel like it was like a personal attack. Like, do you know what I mean? Um, but I've come to realize it's like, not everybody in the whole world is going to like
Your art.
everything that you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like chocolate. Like 90% of people like chocolate, but you're gonna have those 10% that don't like chocolate, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, we can pretty much all agree chocolate's pretty awesome. Like, you know what I mean? So like, it's just like that kind of scenario. Like, you know what I mean? But like, for an artist, as long as you're putting it out there and it's true to who you are, you don't have to make any apologies about it, whether or not somebody likes it or not. That's not your problem, right? Maybe that person, you know, is having a bad day. Like, who knows? Like, you know what I mean? Maybe that person is not creative at all. Maybe they don't like art. Like, it's not our job to make sure that everybody likes our work. It's just our job to be authentic to our work and be brave enough to put it out there and make sure that it exists, like, you know, outside of our minds, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure. And I totally believe that it's something that once you have put it out there, then it's not your job to make other people like it. Right? Because this is who you are. There are a lot of people who will like you as who you are. There are tons of people who are not going to like who you are, and it's okay, because then you're just going to connect more with the people who like you. And I think the other thing is also, it's also not just being scared of what other people who you don't know, whether they like you or not. It's like, it's the family and the friends that you know, and the people that you value the most. It's whatever that they say to you, and those are the comments that are usually most hurtful. And I like, it's always about something like that. Like, what are they going to think about me? Like, if I fail, then they'll be like, oh, see, like, it's you're not meant to do this, or something like that, you know? Like, it's the people who are closest
you
to
know what it is? I read a book. It's called The War of Art. Okay, so there's a book called The Art of War. This is just a play on words, and it's called the War of Art, right? And there's a chapter specifically in there, okay, where it addresses the fact that when you are gonna go out and do something creative and different, you are going to be hit with like your family and friends not supporting what you're doing. Do you know why? It's because they're uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable. They're watching you and they feel like very uncomfortable watching you change and transform into something that they're not used to. So they want to change you, bring you back to the way that you were. So they're going to say stuff to you that they think that they're going to make you change back to who you were, right? Because they're uncomfortable with who you're becoming, right? And that's going to be one of the things that you have to overcome, right? Is to not, I know it's like you're the closest people to you, but it's because they know you so well, they want you to stay the way that you are. But you know, I feel like as a creative person, you always have to continue to evolve, like as a creative person. Now, I know you had another question. It's just like, why do like should everybody be encouraged to be creative? Like, how are non-creative people, like, how are you going to show non-creative people to be creative, kind of thing, right? I don't believe that. Okay, I believe that everybody maybe was creative at some point, right? And whenever they were stifled, like they might have just remained dormant, like, you know, and you know, they were encouraged to be athletic, they were encouraged to be academic. So, but in that sense, it's like when they're not doing that type of stuff, they still have creativity in their own life, but in who knows how. Perhaps it's in their cooking, right? Perhaps it's the way they fold their towels. Like it's like everybody has their own creativity, but it just comes out in different ways, right? It might not come out in the way that we're like painting something and expressing it like in a very vivid and loud way. Their creativity might just be really like how they arrange their spices in their spice drawer, right? So like, I never say that, oh, like, you should be more creative. Like, I just feel like everybody has their own like creativity, but it comes out in different ways. Like some people can write beautiful cards and poetry, but and that's creative, but you may never hear anything or see it. Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's yeah. So
yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up because the main reason of this show, how it evolved, was the fact that like I got talking to Doris, and she actually said, as a creative, there is no shortage of ideas. There's only a shortage of time. And for myself, since I told you like I'm more of a science person, and creative is probably not a word that I will use to describe myself. I'm more like methodical, analytical. So then as I was talking to her, I was like, wow, like this idea of creativity is so interesting. So I want to do more research. And as you said, like creativity at the end of the day, it's not about arts or crafts, right? It can be arts, it can be crafts, but at the end of the day, like our lives is the main canvas, as Chase Jarvis always calls it, like the canvas. And we are here to create our life the way that we want to. And just by listening to that, I was like, oh my gosh, this is such an important message that I really want to bring out to people. And that's how this series is born. That's how I brought Doris, and I'm going to bring on other artists to come on to talk about this. And I think at the end of the day, like we only really live once. Like we don't want to have to live in a life where other people are dictating what we do. If let's say you care about what other people's opinions is about, then you'll always be acting according to what you think other people will approve of you or disapprove of you. But then that's what's a life like that to live by, right? So that's why this series is born. So my next question to you, Doris, is, I know like as you being a creative, like you're very in tune with your surroundings, but like for people who are kind of like myself, who are just about to get started on this creative quote unquote journey, what are some of the advices or tips or anything like that that you can offer to people to kind of kickstart this journey?
Okay, like because like we touched upon like the discussion about layers, like like layers. But when I talk about layers, I'm talking about like layers of ourselves, right? Like I think that everything that we create has to kind of have like come through us from experience or a story. So I think that it's important to like think about who you are as a person and then create from that. Like for me, like I said, lettering has always been a passion of mine, right? But I also really always loved vintage things, like old things, like things you can't just buy anywhere, like unique things. So like when I created love lettering, like I started working with this vintage Southern Charm vintage rentals because she had such beautiful vintage things, and I could just imagine myself lettering on them to make really unique looking pieces. But then on top of that, it's like, so the one layer is the vintage, one layer is the lettering. And then if you were to choose the right type of words that were very unique, that's like another layer that is added on top of the two unique things already, right? So I think that was kind of how like everything started for me. It's just finding different and unique ways. For me, like I think it's always been a challenge to show things that hasn't been seen. Like that's part of the anatomy of me trying to be different, right? Is to show something that I haven't, or show or create something that I haven't seen before, right? And that's what kind of like makes me feel like invigorated when I'm making, right? So I think every individual person should kind of take a look at themselves. Like, what am I about? Like, list all the things that you love, like 20 things that you love, like, bubble tea, like eating out, like for me, vintage things, the casino, like, like, like there's so many facets of my life that I love, right? So like when I'm creating, like how are all these things going to be intertwined? Like if I was like writing a story about my work, like what is the story behind that piece, right? That's why I find it very frustrating when people copy other people, because when you're copying other people, you don't have that story to tell, right, about your work. So then therefore there's no authenticity to it, right? And you can say that you're being creative when you're copying somebody else's work, right? But you're not an artist, right? Like that's how, like, always strive to be like the artist, right? As opposed to just like a, I don't want to say like, because like I'm very like crafts people are very like are amazing too, like, you know what I mean? Like I'm just always more impressed with people who are trying to do something different and unique, as opposed to someone who can just execute something and copy it verbatim. Like, it is impressive that if you can, like, if you can emulate or copy something, right? But at the same time, to me, the story behind the work is always what's more interesting than sometimes the work themselves, right? And that's why people like will pay for, like, something that's true from like a true artist, as opposed to someone who's just copying that artist, right? Like making, like painting something that looks like that person's work, versus that person's work, right? So yeah. To go back to, if you're just beginning, I think that you should always write down all the things that you love first, right? Like, figure out what is the creative way that you're going to use to express like your medium as an artist, and then mix in, like, layer in all the things that you love within your work, like, so
Yeah, I think that's so important, that in order for us to create something unique, we have to tap back into who we are as a person. And it's not, because I think people may be so hung up on, oh, I need to create this, or I'm just learning a new craft. But learning a new craft is fine, and sometimes we do need to kind of like emulate someone's work in order to get our groove into getting over that learning thing.
I think it's like somebody can inspire you. Like I'm very convinced, like, when I wrote Extraordinary Hand Lettering, people were like, you're going to share everything that you know and how you do what you do. Like, it's going to really like affect your bottom line, right? And I knew that that was going to happen. But for me, what's important, what to me was inspiring people to do it, as opposed to like, my long journey is like to be a part of people's lettering journey, right? Not like try to hoard all my secrets and make the most money. Like, that's not what I'm about. Like, I rather like someone tell me, oh my God, your book really helped me when I was making this or making that, right? So, and because I wrote this book, I know that a lot of people are doing the stuff that I originally was doing when I first started. But I've already gone past that. Like, that type of stuff is not interesting to me anymore. That's why I had to create an art exhibit, because I needed to do something more, right? So I always feel like I just need to do more, and push myself out of my typical like comfort zone, in order for me to feel more fulfilled as like a creative, and as an artist, right? So yeah.
And I think it's also like for people who are in a business, for example, the main goal is to make money, okay? Because they have to like mouths to feed, and also exploring the creative side, right? So it's like a fine line between the two. And when people kind of get stuck in this point, just because they have to keep on making the money, then it kind of stifles their creativity, because then they'll be like, well, what if I try something that is not going to make that money anymore. And I think you have a very strong opinion on this. Would you be able to share a little bit on that?
Okay. I think like if you are continuously, honing in on your craft and your skills, let's just say like for me, it's lettering. If you're constantly like perfecting and practicing and everything like your lettering, then the next step is like, what else can you use your lettering for? Like, when I started the studio, I knew that what I was good at was lettering, right? Lettering on any type of surface, on any type of thing, right? I knew all these things, but I had to think about who would need what I'm offering, right? So like, that's the thing, along with being creative, like making and doing and lettering, I'm also creative in the way of thinking about like, who do I think would need this? Who do I think my service would help? And so like you also have to find like, various ways to get your work out there. And, so for me, I'm kind of like like I always told people, I'm kind of like in different pockets, right? Because I'm in like the crafts market pocket because I do stuff like the one of a kind show and Etsy and things like that. And then I'm in like the wedding market, like, because I do a lot of stuff in the wedding industry. But then I kind of put myself in like this lettering community, right, where I teach workshops and stuff. So like I just found like what I know that I love and how can I put it in different places so that it would kind of like grow like organically, like wider, like, you know what I mean? But as long as you have something that you really, really love, it's like, if you're like a woods person and you make stools, right? Like, that for kids, like maybe you have one style and you do very well. Like, if you just keep on making that one style for the rest of your life, you probably make good money, but you probably don't feel that creative, right? But if you were every year to create like a secondary design, like, add something like a fresh design, stool design for your company, then that would bring in an extra income because there's a second design that people might really like, but it's also flexing your creativity because you've designed something new, or at least once a year, you're going to be flexing your creative muscles to come up with something exciting for other people to see. If people are already a fan of your work, then they're more likely, like, so it's like, as a creative, it's not only important for you to be good at what you do, it's also important to be able to keep on pushing yourself to be creative, keep on showing people what you're capable of, and yeah, communicating with people too. And, just like, you still have to put yourself out there. Like, no matter how popular you are and how good you are, you still have to continue to put yourself out there, right? So
thank you so much for all these ideas that you have shared with us. That's just because for me, like, it's like you kind of know these things in the back of your head, but it's the actually verbally presented to you that's like, oh yes, like this is what I need to do. Just because with this pandemic that hit us, you know what, like a lot of us got affected, and it's what's the next step that you can evolve yourself so that you are not stuck at your previous self. And I think getting to know yourself definitely, and keep on continuing pushing yourself and not caring about what other people say, all these things are super important for all of us to keep in mind. And I would like to thank you for sharing all these with us. So before we wrap up, I want to share with you that Doris does have an awesome gift for us, and it will be in the email that we'll be sending it to you. And the other thing is, Doris, can you tell us where we can find you?
Okay, so I think like my most favorite platform would be Instagram. Like, that's I think I'm on there the most, which would be love lettering underscore Doris Wai. If you're looking for like my book or like lettering materials and things like that, you can find on my website, www.lovelettering.ca. Otherwise, you can learn as how I do some of my signage on my YouTube channel, which is the Lettering Lifestyle. Other than that, I'm around. So, I'm around, So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. Yeah.
All right. I would like to say thank you for taking your time out to come on this interview with me. It's an absolute pleasure for me to chat with you, and all the best to you.
Thank
And
you.
thank you again.
I hope that your audience is like inspired and, becomes more creative or feels less stifled, like, when it comes to being creative. So,
Yes, I hope so too. And I'm super excited to be rolling this out. And yes, all right. Thank you so much, Doris. I'll
you're
talk to you
welcome.
soon.
Okay, for sure.
Bye.
Okay, bye.